To service your chain damper, you'll need the following things: a clean workspace, a lint-free rag, lithium-free grease, something that's designed for suspension seals. As long as it's low migration and lithium-free, you are good to go. We're using this grease gun here, but you can apply it using like a brush or anything like that. Some protective gloves and protective eyewear is mandatory for this, and we're using this brush to help applicate the grease. The device uses a 3mm Allen key. We have this torque wrench here, which is 4 Newton meters, so we can tighten up the spec. And on the left we have our service kit. It's not mandatory to use one of these, but if you are replacing the parts, then you have these thrust bushes, the X-rings, 4 elastomers and a O-ring, and then finally we have a replacement chainring here, which already has the bush pressed into place. So start by removing the 4 faceplate bolts. Turn the device over and remove the back cover plate. You'll see there's no grease inside this device because it's brand new. However, yours will be pretty dirty, so ensure you clean it off completely with like parts cleaner and your lint-free rag. If you're going to be replacing the parts, you can chuck any of the loose parts except for the springs away. If not, make sure they're cleaned up, ready to go back in the device. So I'm just going to pull the remainder of the parts off of this mount plate. Keep those 2 springs aside. And again, you can either reuse those parts or put them back in. So these are the cover plate on the left and the mount plate on the right. I'm going to begin by applying a circle of grease all around the outside of these 2 plates. This is the most important part of the process. This grease circle will keep the device sealed and prevent water from ingressing inside. So apply liberally to the entirety of the groove around the outside of the plates. And then on this mount plate I'm going to apply a circle of grease on the inside. This is where the chainring bush sits, and a couple of spots where the elastomers will sit. And a line of grease where the springs will actuate. So again, the lines of grease where the springs will actuate, and some spots of grease that will hold the smaller components in place, and a line of grease around the outside that will help seal the device from the weather. What I'm going to do next is smear this in with a applicator, in this case a paintbrush. I'm going to run a line of grease around this little shelf just there in the center of the device. That will help retain the small O-ring that protects the middle of the device from water ingress. Just smear the blobs of grease down so they are nice and clear. Just do a little bit of touch-up work because my line of grease wasn't perfect. And then you're ready to do the same with the cover plate. So a couple of dots in the elastomer holes and a line of grease where the springs will actuate. There's a text service guide that has pictures that highlight where the grease needs to be applied, but if in doubt, apply it everywhere and you can't go wrong. Okay, so now we move on to reinstalling the components. So firstly we're going to put these thrust bushes into the machined out recesses. These thrust bushes are all identical, so you can't mix them up, and they'll only go into the plates in one orientation, so make sure that they are kind of sat flush and aren't partially out of their seats. The important thing here is to ensure the tails of the thrust bush that I'm pointing to now are sat flush and not stuck up in the air, because that will inhibit the device's rotation. And I'm going to take one of the X-rings and cover it in some grease. Just paint it a little bit and run it through my fingers before pushing it down into the slots around the device. These X-rings are the main thing that's going to keep the device running smooth for a long period of time. So ensure that when you seat them, they are fully sat into their holes and there's no twist in the X-ring. One side of it should be facing up all the way around. So trace it around 360 and make sure that there's no twist. If there is, pull it out and start again. Just run a little bit more grease around the outside to ensure everything's nice and lubed up. And then we're going to take our smaller O-ring and seat it on the shelf in the middle of the device. If the O-ring starts to pop off and it doesn't want to stay in place, just apply a little bit more grease to that shelf so it sticks into its slot and doesn't pop off whilst you're assembling the device. Next, take your chainring and you want to run some grease in this little groove here. It's machined on both sides. That grease will compress against the X-rings and form a nice water impenetrable seal. Trap that grease in between the metal of the chainring and the X-ring, and that labyrinth will make it nice and protected from the elements. And then I'm just painting a little bit of grease on the flat surfaces in the middle of the chainring to ensure everything is friction free. So when I place the device down, I am orientating it in a manner where the bush is sat down against the mount plate. So the lip of the bush is flat against the mount plate, and the cutouts in the chainring line up with the correct parts of the mount plate. So if you pay attention to laser etching on the chainring, you need to line these up with these two little circular recesses. This is where the elastomers will sit, so you line that up with the elastomer hole and place it down like so. There's only one orientation the chainring can be put down in, so you can't get this wrong. But actuate the chainring back and forth to ensure that the two elastomer holes are visible, so that you can place them in the next steps. So next we're going to place those elastomers in. When doing this, ensure that they are sat fully into their recesses. The elastomers are flush and not sticking out as this top right one is, as that will lead to them falling over when you close the device up. They need to be vertical so that they'll connect with the cover plate and stay in place once the device is closed. So there's 4 in total. And next we're going to put the springs into the chain damper. So identify the 2 spring slots, which are these 2 large ones, Turn the chainring slightly anti-clockwise to make as much space as possible in there, and identify this little tail, which is the end of the spring. That can tend to catch when you're trying to compress it inside the chain device. So as long as that's facing upward towards you, it won't catch on the chainring, and it'll make the job a lot easier. If it's placed down, it'll kind of catch on that edge as you're putting it in. So just orientate it upward, and that will make your life way easier. So place the tail against the stop at the bottom of the device, and then using your forefinger, I'm going to kind of roll the device in, compress with my forefinger and roll with my thumb. I like to press the end of the spring against that knuckle there, and then once a little bit of compression has taken place, I just do the rest of the job by rolling with my thumb. So like so, press in and roll. I'm supporting the chain device with my left hand, and I'll show you that from another angle as well. Support with your left hand, compress with your knuckle, and roll it in with your thumb. You don't need to compress the springs very much to get them in. So I'm going to do the same with my next spring, but I'll rotate the chainring all the way around so that I can use my right hand to do so. If you're left-handed, you can actually use your thumb and insert it from the left-hand side. And to do that, all you do is press it in and sort of push it down. I personally find that more tricky, as I'm right dominant. But if you're left dominant, you might want to try that one instead. Once you've installed the springs, they'll want to pop out of their slots and kind of disassemble the device in front of you. So you need to kind of pay attention and keep pressing down on the device every now and again to hold it in place. Otherwise, it will spring apart. So give it just a little bit of a push or a press every now and again. Don't kind of walk away and make a coffee. So finally, we are going to close the device up. So identify these two recesses for the elastomers on the cover plate and line them up with the elastomers in the rest of the chain damper. Place the plate on, give it a little nestle to ensure that it's in place, and then a little bit of pressure to hold it still. I'm not going to lift it from the chainring to turn the device over. I'm going to lift it from the center and kind of hold it like a burger. The reason for doing this is if you lift it from the chainring, the whole device will pop apart. So you need to kind of pinch it and hold it, and then hold some pressure down on the faceplate to keep everything in place before placing one of the bolts in and beginning to tighten the device up. Here you'll see that it didn't catch the threads initially, so I had to put a little bit more pressure on the torque wrench to kind of find those threads. But once I did, I just screwed it down until it became snug, and then moved on to the next bolt rather than torquing it up. I want to pull the faceplate down in a nice level fashion by tightening each one just a little bit at a time. And once all four are in place, I'm going to tighten them in a cross pattern, sort of an X pattern. So I'll do this one up to the 4 Newton meter torque spec. And instead of going in a kind of square fashion, I'm going to go across the plate, tighten that one, and then move to the other two. And this will ensure that the plate is nice and level and evenly torqued, so the device is correctly assembled. And before we install it, I'm going to place it on the crank arm and actuate the chainring with my thumbs, just to ensure that the chainring is moving freely and everything's working as intended before I go to the effort of installing it. So just holding the crank and kind of actuating it with my fingers and thumbs, I can check that there's some movement there, and it's working. It's pretty stiff, but it needs to be in order for the device to work properly. And you're good to go. Thank you.